Find the life you were always meant to live.
Well, I don't know who that guy in the white pants was, but he's new around here. I would keep him. I think he's going places. Y'all should put him on staff. Good morning, everyone. I want to say good morning to those of you joining us online as well. What a joy. I mean, I'm just kind of, my emotional bucket is so full stepping back in here today. And we're going to get to the message in just a minute. But I want to bring greetings from your sibling church on the, as I like to say, the western side of the lake. Oh, so that's that way, Mike. It's that way, isn't it? That's the west, the besters. But in all seriousness, it was 12 years ago this month, 12 years ago that I stood on this platform for the first time. In fact, Harrison was auditioning for the role as worship leader here. That's how long ago that was. And yeah, I was 12 years old. And but it was quite remarkable because you guys as a church were such an inspiration. You guys were the reason that my family and I packed up and came all the way to the other side of the other coast. Was because of this vision for church planting. And if you're new around here or you're checking Lake Forest out, you need to know this about your church here. It is incredible. But every Lake Forest church sets aside 3% of its gross giving, total giving, into a special fund specifically to plant new baby churches. And so, 12 years ago, I stood on this stage with a small team of people, and you all laid hands on us and prayed for us and sent us out. And because of your generosity, it was your giving that funded us for those first 30 months till we got our feet about us. And today, as Mike said, there is a thriving church, a Lake Forest church in the Denver region because of your generosity. And so if you were a part of that or you were a part of giving here, I just want you to hear my thank you. I really mean it. It has been such a gift and an honor to be a part of your kingdom work. Well, I want to start this way. I've got a little confession to make. Can I start with a confession? You don't know me, so some of you don't know me. I'm going to confess right up front. I've got a little problem with envy. Sometimes I'm envious of other people's lives. What do I mean? Well, a number of years ago, my family and I bought a 1995 Class A RV for $8,000. And every summer we go camping in this thing, and it's atrocious. It looks like something out of Breaking Bad, right? That's what it looks like. I mean, it literally looks like I'm cooking meth. I'm not, but that's what it looks like. And every summer, my family and I, we pile into it, get in there. I get behind the wheel. I feel like a 16-year-old kid all over again. It's just so much. The air conditioner doesn't even work, but we love this thing, right? It's awesome. We have so many fun memories and adventures in it. And it, for the last 12 years, has been our pride and joy. Every summer, we go to the beach in this thing. It's just awesome. That was until 2 years ago when we were on our way to the beach and we stopped at a Buc-ee's and we pulled up next to this. My little meth-mobile did not look so cool next to that. Okay, that wasn't the literal RV, but it looked something like that. I mean, this thing looked like billions of dollars, right? And so I thought to myself, I got to go find out who's driving this thing, right? And so I walked over, and the guy pumping gas, and I said, "Oh, man, that's a really nice RV." And he said, "Thanks." I was hoping he didn't see mine. And I said, tell me, where are you guys going? Tell me about your adventure. And he said, "Oh, I've got to tell you. We are wrapping up a 3-year-long road trip where we have visited 49 of the states in the nation because we're getting to pick where we want to live because we can live wherever we want." And in that moment, I'm just being real, in that moment, something sinister happened in me, right? My heart hit the floor, and this little thought began to occur. You know what? I want that. I want that life. I want to be able to drive around for 3 years in an RV and visit every state in the nation. I want to pick where I want to live. And then an even more sinister thought began to emerge in my shoe. It crawled up my leg somewhere through my heart into my head. And it was this. Not only do I want that, but I think I deserve it more than this guy does. And so I did what any of you would have done. I punched him in the nose. I got in his RV and I stole his family, right? No, I'm kidding. See, that was a moment of envy. It was a moment of coveting. And that's how envy and coveting works. It's a simple recipe. You probably have your own version of this. It usually starts with a, hey, I want that. And then you add a little, I think I deserve it more than they do. And now you've got the perfect recipe for envy and for coveting. See, envy takes root in these two basic questions. Why not me? How come they? Why not me? Why not that RV for me? How come they? And my guess is, if we're really honest today, I mean, if we were really honest, right, we would all acknowledge that we've got some of this going on in our own hearts as well. Lots of different things we can envy and covet. Sometimes it's wealth when we see someone else who seems to be living in opulence, or maybe for you it's physical beauty, or someone else's influence, or maybe it's someone's exceptional talent. I received an email from a guy recently who said, Aron, I'm really sorry to say this, but when I see you up on the stage preaching, I often think to myself, man, I'm so envious of his good looks, his wit, and his charm. It was signed Brad Pitt. Of course, I'm joking, but you see, that's how my envy works, right? It gets inside of me. It takes root in me. And it leads me to places I don't want to go. We're in a series on the 10 Commandments, the 10 sayings, as it would say in Hebrew, what's referred to as the Decalogue, the 10 words. This beautiful covenant that God came to form with his people, Israel. And if you're not familiar with the story, again, we've watched this. These are not rules that were given to God's people so that they could be saved. He had already saved them from Egypt. He had already rescued them from Pharaoh. But he leads them through the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea, this beautiful birth imagery as he is giving birth to a new people. And then he leads them directly to Mount Sinai, a kind of altar for a kind of wedding ceremony where they are going to exchange vows to define the kind of relationship that they are going to have together. In fact, the 10 Commandments really are the 10 words of God's covenant with his people. You might not know this, but the commandments were written on 2 stones. You might say, why 2 stones? Could they not fit all of them on one? And the answer is no. Each stone contained all 10 commandments. Because in the ancient Middle East, when a covenant was formed, there were 2 copies produced, one for each party in the covenant. But God kept both of those in his temple, in the tabernacle, because God was the one who was going to model what faithfulness to a covenant looks like. So this is a wedding ceremony, and these are the vows they're pledging to one another. And God ends his 10 vows with this one. He says, do not covet. It's the final one. As I'm going to suggest today, it might just be the most important one. Our commandment comes today from Exodus 20:17. Let me just read this to you. You probably are familiar with these words, but listen to these as if for the first time. Exodus 20:17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or his donkey, his RV, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Anything that belongs to your neighbor. That's a pretty comprehensive list, isn't it? Now, the word used here is a really interesting word in the Hebrew. It's the word hamad. Very interesting word picture here. Simply means to earnestly or even obsessively desire what someone else has. I love how Rankin Wilborn describes it. He says, coveting is wanting any other portion in life than the one you've already been given. It's a close cousin to the sin of envy. Envy says, I'm jealous of what so-and-so has. Coveting takes it one step further and says, you know what? I think I deserve it more than they do. And so today, I'm going to use these 2 words, covet and envy, interchangeably. They're 2 sides of the same coin, and they both lead us down a path that we're going to discover today is not a path that we want to be found on. So I thought we might begin with this, because this is dark, powerful stuff, right? I thought we might begin with a mass confession. Who here chronically, deeply, darkly deals and wrestles with envy and coveting? Okay, that's what I thought. None of you, right? None of you do. Not even those of you in the balcony. One of the great things about living in the Lake Norman areas, thanks to our education and all of our accomplishments and our upright moral character, we've actually defeated envy. Like envy's just not a part of our lives. We have rid our lives of envy, as made evident by all of you in this room right here who never envy, right? Never. But that's not my story. In fact, I've got a deep, dark, rich past history with envy. And those people who study this tell us something really interesting. We don't tend to envy those who are very different from us or far away from us. No, we tend to envy those who are most similar to us and closest to us. So what that looks like for me is that I often find myself struggling with envy over a colleague's great speaking ability, or maybe a pastor's leadership and teaching ability. I envy those people who post perfect photos of their perfect families on perfect vacations with perfect kids and perfect pets. And if you're here and you're someone who has never once dealt with envy in your life, I envy that about you too. That's how dark my darkness of envy is. But the point is this. Again, I think if we were honest, we all deal with this in some way, don't we? And we know where envy leads. It's a terrible way to live. Envy leaves you bitter and miserable. It breaks up relationships. It destroys families. It puts us in competition with neighbors and family members. It destroys community. And this would all be fine and good if envy led us to something good on the other side. But the great deception, the great trick of envy and coveting is that it leaves us more empty and more bitter at the end. Envy leads to a life of despair. Listen to how the writer of Proverbs describes it. He puts it this way. He says, a heart at peace, a heart at rest, gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. It's kind of interesting. Prior to the Ten Commandments, the only other occurrence of this word hamad, where we get this word covet, the only other occurrence prior to the Ten Commandments in the entirety of the Bible that leads up to that, only one other time, and it's in the Garden of Eden. When the woman sees the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it says that it was desirable, it was hamadable, it was covetable, which seems to suggest that coveting might just tap into the deepest, most broken, fundamental flaw in humanity. Now, coveting is where we see the Bible began. But what are we to do? What are we to do with this sin of envy? It goes deep inside of us. Is there another way? Well, today I want to turn from Genesis chapter 3, the garden, one chapter over to Genesis chapter 4, and look at a story of envy, to see how envy works, but more importantly, to see that God is actually giving us another option. He gives us a way out, a way forward, if we will choose it. If you're familiar with Genesis chapter 4, you know I'm alluding to the story of Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel were brothers. We're told in Genesis 4 that they bring their offerings to God, and then something happens. Look with me at verse 2, Genesis chapter 4, verses 2 through 5. Now Abel kept flocks. So Abel's the animal guy, right? And Cain worked the soil. Cain is the agricultural guy. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face downcast. See, Abel brings the best that he has, the choice portions, the firstborn of the flocks and herds. Cain, apparently, he's kind of going through the motions. And so Abel, who brought his best, knew a kind of spiritual intimacy and favor and connection with God that Cain did not. And that was painful for Cain. But that did not prompt Cain to go inward. It did not prompt Cain to look at his own motives and desires, which he could have done. Instead, He decided that his problem was not himself. He decided his problem was his brother. And so this thought began to form in him. What if there was no Abel? You see, if there was no Abel, then all of God's blessing, all of God's favor would be mine. Now, what the Bible says here is really fascinating. It says that God looked with favor. And this phrase, it's a Hebrew idiom that really means to notice, to see. But we also see throughout the rest of the Old Testament that it confers a kind of blessing. There's a kind of blessing that comes with the noticing. And so we know that Cain experienced some kind of blessing. We don't know what it was. Maybe his flocks flourished, or maybe there was some other kind of material blessing, or maybe he got a swanky new RV. We don't know what it was, but we knew that he was blessed, and this made Cain envious. He coveted his brother's blessing. Now, what the Bible says, I got tied up there. I got a little off script. See, maybe Abel's flocks flourished, and when Cain noticed this, he had those two questions, right? He thought, why? Why that blessing for him, and then why not me? And this why question really is the million-dollar question for us in the story. Why does God look at Abel's offering but not Cain's? Why does God bless Abel but not Cain? And here is where the genius of the scriptures comes into focus. The story doesn't really say. And this has been debated for centuries. Even the New Testament writers are wrestling with this. They will talk about how Abel offered his sacrifice in faith, and that's true. But the simple fact is Genesis leaves this question unanswered, and that's the point. What the Bible is pointing out is something that you and I experience on a daily basis. Namely, that God doesn't bless everyone equally or in the same way or at the same time. He doesn't. Let me prove this to you. Take swimming, for example. Where are my competitive swimmers out there? Any competitive swimmers? Any competitive swimmers? Yes? All right. I love swimming. I'm a terrible swimmer, but I love it. And my family, we love to nerd out during the Olympics on swimming, right? And these athletes are remarkable. They've trained their whole lives. Those of you who do this, I mean, y'all, it's like an all-in kind of thing, right? And they are just honed and disciplined. And then one day at the Olympics, a 13-year-old dude named Michael Phelps shows up. Did you know Michael didn't even start swimming until he was 13? Did you know that? And so I'm watching Michael, and here he is sitting on the edge of the pool, eating Cheetos and drinking Dr. Pepper, and then he gets in the pool and he obliterates everybody, right? And I'm thinking, that's not fair. You see, God does not bless everyone equally or in the same way when it comes to swimming. Okay, you didn't like my swimming example. How about the spelling bee? How about the spelling? Any spelling? Did you know this was the 100th anniversary of the spelling bee? It's awesome. You should go and watch this kid who won online on YouTube. It's outstanding. 13-year-old Phasian. And there was like this playoff between the final two. They went like 13 rounds or something. And then finally he gets this word, and you see this grin come on his face because he knows this word. And I'm gonna try and pronounce this word. I might mess this up. The word was éclaircissement. Éclaircissement. I don't even know what that means, let alone how to spell it, right? But this kid, he doesn't even flinch. He doesn't do the, you know how they sometimes do that? He just comes right out and slams it and wins and takes on the title. And in that moment, I'm thinking, this kid is incredible. The intelligence, the brilliance. You see, when it comes to the spelling bee, God does not bless all people in the same way at the same time. Can you imagine, for a moment, how Cain might have responded? Like, we know how he does respond, and it's bad, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But imagine with me for a moment, how should Cain have responded to God's blessing in his brother's life? Well, imagine if his response had been something like this. Oh man, bro, I'm so gassed for you. That blessing is fire. It totally slaps. Did I get that? Cameron Poppins, did I get that right? I'm trying there. That's my best. But seriously, think about this. Can you imagine if he was like, bro, it is so cool to see how God is blessing your sheep. I hope this is just one of many moments of blessing and God's favor in your life. It reminds me what a great God of blessing and grace and favor we serve and worship. Can you imagine? That could have been his response, right? But it wasn't. It wasn't. In fact, the Bible tells us that Cain became angry. So interesting. Something about his brother's blessing made him bitter and angry. And the text uses this interesting phrase. It says his face fell. He couldn't even look at his brother. So vehement was his anger. So deep was his bitterness. You see, that's where coveting, that's where envy leads us. And it's here that we see one of the most amazing acts of God in the entire Old Testament. Verse 6, God comes to Cain like a compassionate friend and counselor. He says, Cain, listen, son, why are you angry? Don't you know that if you keep doing right by me, I'm going to bless you as well? But Cain, my son, listen, I want to warn you because I love you. Don't let envy get the best of you. Don't let the why not me take root in you. It's like a tiger crouching outside your door that's going to devour you. Don't let it. You don't have to give in. But of course he does. And in the very next verse, y'all, we're only 4 chapters into the Bible. In the very next verse, we reach a new low rock bottom for humanity. Cain's envy over his brother's blessing leads him to deceive, to attack, to kill, to hide, and to lie. And human beings have been following suit ever since. But it didn't have to be that way. You know, one of the most fascinating moments I'm trying to draw out here is this interaction between Yahweh, between God and Cain. And in this moment, God comes to Cain with this warning. And it's somewhere between the moment of envy and the decision to murder. God says, Cain, sin is crouching at your door. It's like a crouching tiger. It's like a hidden dragon. But you must master it. You must exercise dominion over it. Cain, you don't have to go down this road. There is another way. So, what does that other way look like? I mean, really, practically. What does it look like to master the crouching tiger of envy in our lives? Is that even possible? I've been reflecting on this a lot. I preached this sermon at my church about 4 weeks ago, and this one has continued to haunt me because you might not know this unless you preach someday, but one of the things that the Holy Spirit does for the preacher often is the Holy Spirit will preach the sermon to you long before you ever preach it to anybody else. And y'all, I have been so convicted on this. I feel like I've been noticing almost on an hourly basis this crouching tiger, this envy that's just waiting right there for me if I give myself over to it. And it's been quite convicting for me. What I've been noticing, though, are some ways of responding that are helping me to live and experience grace and freedom from that envy. And I want to share some of those with you. You might have some of your own that you would add to my list. I'm going to give you 3 things, and I want to frame them up this way, because here's what I think envy and coveting looks like at its root. Envy happens for me when I notice the gap between what someone else has and what I desire, what I want. There's a gap there. And anyone who's ever traveled to London, anybody ever been to London before? A couple of y'all? Okay, when you go to the train, you go to get on the train in London and you're getting on, there's a voice that says, mind the gap. So what I want to do today is I want to mind the gap. I've got 3 things. The first one begins with a G, the second with, okay, Jay, that's as good as I've got today. I'm sorry, y'all. Come back next week. There'll be a good sermon Mike's preaching. So 3 things, G-A-P, 3 practices that I've been quite honestly just doing and learning to manage, to learn how to not let envy devour me. And I want to share these with you. And first is simply this. It is to practice a conscious act of gratitude. A conscious act of gratitude. Now, I know this probably sounds quite basic to you guys, right? This is probably almost juvenile, and that's probably why it speaks to me so profoundly. But what I've been learning is that this conscious act of gratitude is the first line of defense when it comes to envy. When I notice myself noticing what someone else has, I have an opportunity to shift my focus off of whatever it is that they have onto what God has already given me. That's a conscious act of gratitude. Let me give you an example. In my house, we have an old geothermal air conditioning unit, and it works really well in the winter. But every summer, it breaks down and it needs recharging and servicing, and I just never know, and it's gonna be, when it breaks down, it takes 2 weeks to get the service guy to come, and I just never know which 2 weeks it's gonna be, right? Well, this summer, it happened to break down a few weeks ago during that little season when North Carolina was impersonating Arizona. Do y'all remember that month? And so it broke down, and I remember we were just sweating it out in our house. And so then I got invited over to a friend's house for dinner. I remember walking in the front door, and I opened it. It was like 65 degrees. Oh. And then this thought began to occur to me. Here's the gap, right? This thought began to occur to me. Boy, it must be nice to have an air conditioner in your house that works. But then that thought grew. And by the time we were sitting down to dinner, that thought had become, you know what? I deserve a house with an air conditioner that works as much as these people do, right? And this bitterness began to take root in me. So much so that by the end of the dinner, I was like, man, I don't know why these people won't invite me over for a slumber party at their house tonight, right? And so I got in my car, and this is just confession. This is just my life, right? Please don't fire me. And I got in my car, I'm thinking, oh my word, the very thing I'm preaching on this weekend is happening right now, right? I'm getting envious, and this bitterness taking. So on the drive home, I decided to practice a conscious act of gratitude. I literally just started listing, turned the radio off, started listing in my mind things that I have to be grateful for. God, I'm grateful for this car. I'm grateful for these friends that invited me over to dinner. I'm grateful for the air conditioner in this car that's cooling me right now, and that if I have to, I can come sleep in this car in my driveway tonight. Right? I'm thankful for my house. I'm just on and on it went. And it was about a 15-minute drive. And by the time I got into my own driveway, guess what was no longer in my heart? Envy. There's no bitterness. I know this isn't super spiritual. You go and try this one. Conscious acts of gratitude are the first line of defense when it comes to envy and coveting, which is why giving, like what Mike was talking about, is so powerful. Giving, tithing, it's like it's like a spiritual discipline superpower. Because when we give, when we tithe, what we're saying is, God, I'm recognizing that every good thing I have in my life comes from you. I'm giving back to you as an act of worship, as an act of trust, as a declaration that I am living in submission and obedience to you, Jesus. And the fruit of that is freedom from envy. All right, first thing I'm learning, we can practice mastery over the tiger of envy through conscious acts of gratitude. Which brings me to our second one. Second thing I found helpful when facing this tiger is to stop and ask, why do I want that thing really? Not why do I tell myself I want this so I can justify feeling jealous and envious and all, but why do I want this thing? What do I think that thing is going to do for me really? I've been reading a researcher from UCLA, a psychologist who studies envy particularly, and she works with clients who are really stuck in this in a deep way. Chronic envy, coveting, they can't get out of. And she has an interesting homework assignment that she often gives them when they're stuck and they can't get out. She says, I tell them I want them to question the hell out of that desire. Did the pastor just say hell? Don't worry, it's in the Bible. But here's the thing. She says, literally, I want you to question the hell out of it, because envy, left unchecked, is a living hell. And so she says, I want you to question the hell out of it. What do you think that thing is actually going to do for you? What deep desire do you think that thing is going to satisfy? See, fundamentally, this is what theologians call idolatry, right? When we take an object, a relationship, a person, their influence, their position, their title, their wealth, their stuff, their family, and we say, if I had that, then I would finally have life. I'd finally have joy. I'd finally have my deepest longings met. That's idolatry. When we take something, a good thing, but we make it an ultimate thing, we find ourselves on the road to envy and despair, the deepest longings that we know only Jesus can satisfy. Which brings me to my third and final practice. Again, you might add to my list. These are things I've been doing. Third and final thing for me is I've been praying, asking God's help to make me into a neighbor keeper. A neighbor keeper. Do you know how the story of Cain and Abel ends? Do you know this? Of course, we know the murder part. Do you remember the conversation afterwards? Cain kills his brother, and then God comes to Cain. And he comes to him not because God is surprised or doesn't know what's happening, but when we are stuck in the brokenness of just our sin nature, God always draws near to us. He's a God of compassion, mercy, grace. So he draws near to Cain. He says, Cain, where's your brother? And remember Cain's response? He says, I don't know, God. Beats me. Am I my brother's keeper, Yahweh? Yahweh, am I responsible for my brother? Am I responsible to love my brother, to celebrate my brother, to mourn with my brother, to rejoice with my brother, to carry my brother's burdens? Yahweh, am I my brother's keeper? And the answer, of course, is yes. Yes, you are, King. Yes, you are. We are called to be brother keepers because that's the kind of community that God created at Mount Sinai, and that's the kind of community Jesus created when he said, here's my new commandment for you. My new command, I want you to love one another the way I have loved you. How's that? For greater love has no one than this, and that they would lay down their life for their friend. Are we our brothers and our sisters keepers, Yahweh? Yes, if we are part of the Jesus one another community. Which kind of reminds me of a story. Jim Roberts is a psychologist, and one day he was visiting his fourth graders' classroom. And that day they were playing a game called Balloon Stomp. Has anybody ever played Balloon Stomp before? It's a great game. They fill balloons up, and then they tie or tape the balloon to the ankle of each student. So each student gets their own balloon. And the object of the game is to go around and stomp on other people's balloons and pop them while trying to protect your own balloon. Got the rules for the game, right? I know it's kind of Darwinian, a little survival of the fittest here. But what's so interesting is Jim Roberts, this psychologist, said as he watched the game transpire, he noticed that it drew out the worst in our human nature. He said some of the kids were so overwhelmed by the anxiety of this game, they actually just committed balloon suicide. They just popped their own balloon. They're like, I'm out, right? I'm done. I'm hanging up. Other kids, he said, literally crawled under desks or tables to try and hide. Still others tapped into their inner bullies, going around pounding fiercely. Such that the only person left, of course, was the biggest, baddest dude in the classroom, and everybody was miserable. Right? But what was interesting is Jim noticed what happened differently when the next batch of students came in. The next class was another class of fourth graders, only these fourth graders were described by the teachers as intellectually disabled. Though, as Jim points out, they were spiritually super-abled. Because when they were told about the game and given their balloons, without permission, they collectively decided to rewrite the rules. Instead, they circled up, and they didn't like this idea of only some people getting to pop balloons and there only being one person with a balloon at the end. So they circled up, and one by one, they took turns popping the balloon of the person next to them so that everyone in the class had an opportunity to pop a balloon. And Jim noticed something that began to swell. He said the first balloon, there was a little bit of laughter and clapping. With the second one, it got louder and more ruckus. He said by the time they had finished the full circle of balloons, every balloon pop was a ruckus, joyful hooray from the entire classroom. Yay. Because, you see, that's a covenant community. That's a one another community. That's a neighbor-keeping kind of community, and it's the kind of community that God is inviting us into today. And can you imagine, just for a moment, can you imagine if we as a church could embody that kind of neighbor keeping? Can you imagine? Band, you guys can come on out. You see, we're all faced with a choice. We're all faced with a choice when it comes to, here's the thing, this is just brass tacks. Just brass tacks, right? We're all faced with a choice. There is a tiger outside your door waiting to devour you. And the choice is, will you give into that envy? Will you choose to continue coveting? Or with God's help, with the resources of Jesus through the power of his Holy Spirit, will you choose a different way? We'll have to wonder, is God's blessing big enough for everyone, or is there only just a little bit? Such that I gotta hoard it, I gotta steal it, I gotta grab it, I gotta chase it. Or is God's blessing big enough for all of us? What game are we gonna play? You know, I've been thinking a lot about this commandment and why it ends the 10. Did you know this is the last of the 10? And there's something about coveting and its power because it operates in darkness. It operates in secret. No one knows when I'm coveting. Had I not told you about my envy struggles, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have no way of seeing that. And that's the power of that envy and coveting in our lives. But, as John, Jesus' best friend, the disciple he loves, said, when we bring that thing into the light, when we confess that, we say, oh God, that envy has been leading me down that path again. Would you forgive me? Would you free me? Would you remind me that you alone, Jesus, satisfy? And would you help me to find my satisfaction in you? See, that is the path of freedom from envy. But you have to choose it. And I want to give you an opportunity to do that even right now. Today we're coming to the communion table. And this is not my table or Lake Forest table, but this is Jesus' table. And it's a reminder that Jesus alone can satisfy. And so it was on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread and he broke it, saying, this is my body broken for you. As often as you eat of it, do so in remembrance of me. In a similar vein, he took a cup of wine, and after giving thanks, he passed it around for all to drink, saying, this is the blood of my new covenant, shed for the forgiveness of your sins. As often as you drink of it, do so in remembrance of me. And so today as we can come with hearts of trust and hope and joy, knowing that God forgives us. He's already saved. He's already rescued. God forgives us of that envy. But we can confess it to him and receive again the signs of his grace and love, declaring that Jesus, you alone are the one who satisfies. So how might you respond to him today? I want to invite you to stand if you're able. Go ahead and take out your cup. And I'm going to let this be the object of our confession. If you're so comfortable with your eyes closed, just hold the cup in front of you. And is there a place in your life that you need to confess to Jesus? Something you've been coveting, something you've been envying, and it's just leading to a life of bitterness and despair. Take a moment and talk to Jesus about that. And now, as you open the bread and the juice and prepare to receive it, would you invite Jesus through his Holy Spirit to satisfy the deep longings in your soul and heart that only he can satisfy? And would you take and receive these elements, these signs of his grace right now? May God bless you as you receive.